Hello, Somerville. My name is Ed Halloran, and welcome to another exciting show, Somerville Labor Show. We are very excited to have a special guest here. As always, labor is the topic. It's what we do. It's what we talk about in the city of Somerville here. And we also get on the national scene as well. So what I want to talk about right now is about my guest, and I want to mention a couple things about my guest, who's a columnist for the Somerville Times. And I want to just talk a little bit about education, because it's always very important. Went to U.S. Santa Cruz, has a BA in sociology of the highest honors, Rutgers University, sociology, and an MBA at Yale University at the Yale School of Management. And I've always admired this man because I read his columns, I enjoy them, it connects with me, I think it connects with many of us. And he's also a community activist in the city of Somerville. And his name is Bill Shelton. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
That's
and
great.
I want to say I've always admired your leadership in both the labor community here and our broader community, and I really appreciate the difference that you're making.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I mean, look, I had a show here with Joe Lynch when I first started this whole thing, and I admire him greatly and a lot of things that he does. And I'm learning always, even as I get older and I get along here, all the wonderful work that the people have done here and the real flavor that's going on in Somerville right now. And you know, I want to talk about, over the years that you've written many columns, and one in particular that was interest to me was that you're a strong labor advocate with some statistics that you mentioned, and you used the word destructive. And the first thing I want to say is that you said that we live in a time in which the U.S. is 146th out of 150 countries in wealth equality. You know, what exactly did you mean by that when you said it?
Well, the difference between the richest of us and the poorest of us is the most extreme in the United States. It's the 146th most extreme out of 150 countries. And that's not, while there are many countries that have people who are certainly poorer than us, there are a few countries that have the extremes of wealth that we have. And that particular figure comes out of a calculation that's called a Gini, G-I-N-I index. It's named after an Italian mathematician, but it's a way of calculating inequality in any set of values.
Wow.
And it is a standard measure used to measure inequalities of both wealth and income around the world.
Now that would be an entire show on that one there. I'm serious. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
You also mentioned that our middle class is being hollowed out, and for the past 4 decades, and wages and benefits have risen an average of 0.27% per year, while average inflation was 14 times that number. How did you arrive at that?
Well, those are just statistics that the Bureau of Labor Statistics keeps. And all you have to do is really go to their website and look at them. But how we got there is probably also the subject of an entire show. But
Well,
much of it has to do with both the increase in average people's salaries from the late 19th century until now was driven almost entirely by the union movement, and the decrease has been driven also by the assault on the union movement for the last 40 years. And that many people who you see on television talk shows will say the reason why that we've lost so many good paying middle class jobs is because of the technology displacing workers and because of globalization. And while those factors have been accurate, other countries have known how to take care of their workers and keep the middle class.
And when you've mentioned other countries, specifically, can you name
Germany,
a couple? And
sure, Germany, Sweden, Norway, all of the social democracies, pretty much.
High in union activity?
Yes, but also they have, it's not now, the unions do have to be forceful and powerful to maintain their political power, but they have the cooperation of the governments because of that political power. So that, for example, the social safety net is much stronger in those countries. And by the way, when you provide decent benefits to people who are unemployed, that raises the floor of the wages of those who are employed. But also a whole series of means of keeping their workers abreast of new technology, providing the training that's necessary for people to stay on top of it, recognizing that going to a college is not necessarily the best thing for everybody, so they have very, very strong, effective apprenticeship programs and training for people who aren't going to go to college, but who are going to utilize the new technology.
Why are we not doing that here? Why have we waited so long, I mean, to introduce things like this? What is the...
It's a matter of power. It's not in the interest of the wealthiest of us.
Is it the 1%?
Yes. Briefly, yes. That's exactly what it is.
It's the 1% of the wealth that's really just the engine. That's the union's demise.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go through chapter and verse. I could take you back, 40 years about how that's happened.
Well, I think the importance of this whole thing really is that, and the topic is that what we're trying to get at here is that it's a slow erosion that continues this downturn, and something has to be done about it. And we have to bring this, that's why you're here, because we need to let the public know,
Yes.
those who are watching this show,
Yeah.
and it's an interesting topic
Yeah.
that we have to raise. You also said that the median hourly wage in constant dollars is less now than it was in 1979.
I should modify that a little bit. It's less for men. It's more ambiguous for women because in 1979, women were a much smaller portion of the labor force. And they've become a larger portion whether or not they wanted to, because they have to. Because the declining family incomes obligated women to go to work. And that's great. For those women who want to, that's great. But for many, it really wasn't a choice.
So I had Kaylin Jordan on the show, and she's also a media consultant and activist. And we talked about the new law that went into effect, equal pay for women and men, which is very important. And we really got into it about the whole thing, about equal pay for women, and the importance of it, and how long this has been going on. So, I mean, even with that in place right now, I mean, I know we're going in the right direction, but I'm very concerned about, of the stagnation of it.
Oh,
and how where's it going to go, and how are we going to end up where we need to be. And you also said that it's not just wages that are at risk. Virtually every bit of legislation that produced social benefits would not have happened without union support.
Yeah, and I would say beyond union support, union leadership. I mean, going all the way back to the 40-hour work week, it exists because of unions. People literally gave their lives in that fight.
And leading into...
I'm sorry.
No, you're right, though, leading into this May Day.
Yeah, let's come back to that, but I just want to trace a couple more things.
Go right ahead.
Pretty much every benefit that we have, like Social Security, exists because unions fought for it. Medicare, Medicaid, pretty much all our social benefits, and the erosion of union power has exactly tracked the erosion of social benefits.
Okay.
But let's go back to May Day because...
few Americans know that the May Day celebration of unions, left of center political parties throughout Europe commemorate, and even that happened in the U.S., the Haymarket Square Massacre in Chicago that occurred during the fight for the 40-hour work week.
That's right.
Now, I had our attorney, Alan McDonald, here 2 weeks ago, and tremendous man who dealt with the Beer Summit with the Crowley Gates, and very exciting.
Okay.
The horrific marathon bombing, that he was involved in as well.
Oh, was he?
And at a very early age, he actually represented workers in a factory in upstate New York that were being worked to death at 16 hours a day, 17, 18 hours a day up there, and successfully won at a very young age to win that. So those are the kind of things that we're looking for. So it's, you know, it's that time again, Bill. It's labor history time, and we're going to talk a little bit about labor history. And Bill, actually, we discussed May Day before the show, which is very interesting to me because a lot of us don't know what May Day means.
Most Americans don't know that the reason why people march around the world is because of something that happened in the U.S.
Yeah, and you know what? May Day to me probably meant, man, spring's here. Let's get out. Let's enjoy it. You know, let's have some fun. You know.
Right.
But I'm going to give you guys a brief history of what I know about May Day. And May Day is an International Labor Day commemorated by political action by labor unions and pro-labor organizations. Also known as International Workers' Day, May Day occurs annually on May 1st. Celebrations typically entail protests, strikes, and social events, and that's what I'm all about, you know? Okay? If need be, we're there. The history of May Day, the first May Day celebration occurred on May 1st, 1886, when 80,000 industrial workers went on strike demanding an 8-hour workday in Chicago, of all places. The strike continued for days, and on May 4th, a bomb went off in Haymarket Square after a labor activist meeting. The bomb killed one police officer, and both police and activists were injured and died in the violence that broke out after the explosion. 8 men, police said were labor organizers, and were charged in the officer's murder and found guilty. So all the men were sentenced to death by hanging except one who was sentenced to 15 years. So this is what people have had to go through. This is the struggle that people have gone through, and it's just unbelievable. And I never knew anything about that. I had no idea, you know, that May Day was that, you know, that tragic to get where we need to be. You know. Also, let's just stay on the national level for a minute.
Before we do, let me just say, I think one of many factors that has undermined the power of labor and therefore the power of working people in the U.S. is that we don't know our own history. It has been systematically excluded from textbooks. That's just one of many, many, many stories that in which labor was the leader, provided the leadership for the kind of way that we live today. And we've lost that, and I wish that there was something we could do to...
Well, you know what? Every time, this has been going on for a long time now. The demonization of unions. This has been going on for quite a while. It's upsetting because we worked so hard to get where we are. And, you know, we're not what people perceive us to be. We're part of the community. We're a fiber of the community. You know, especially the municipal workers as well. You have to, people must understand that. I mean, we really enjoy the work that we do in the city, and we love supporting the community. We're at the events, whether it be the Honk Festival, marching, helping.
I see you at those events.
Well, hey, you know, I mean, I enjoy it. I really do. I really enjoy these things. So they have to understand that, and it's, you know, when you see people marching up to City Hall and you know, and they're upset about particular issues that are going on, whether it be, you know, labor issues, pay, inequality. I mean, look, we're here to be heard. And this is something that has to happen. And we've had meetings on this, we've had discussions on this frequently, and it just doesn't seem like it's resonating. So this is what this show is all about, and it has to continue like that, you know? So nationally, you mentioned that the now Republican dominance, and Trump in particular, and because of the Democratic Party's increasing abandonment of working people, you're saying that a lot of that is what's really bringing unions down. Right, at this particular point. Can you break that down a little bit?
Oh, sure.
And give us...
Sure. From 1936 on, the election of every Democratic president from Franklin Roosevelt on, labor was essential to their victories. And in 1968, labor went all out for Hubert Humphrey, and they took what, I mean, in the beginning was, Humphrey didn't have a prayer. And
Hubert Humphrey.
Hubert Humphrey didn't have a prayer of being elected, and then by election day he almost prevailed. But then the party, in preparing for the next convention, assigned delegate slots to a whole series of specific groups, you know, young people, women, so on, and they purposely excluded labor. And then when Jimmy Carter came in, he frankly snubbed labor. His economic advisors were contemptuous of labor leaders. He abandoned a commitment to public works programs, which would have increased union labor. He, what was the last, I lost that thought, but
That's fine.
But then when Reagan came in, Reagan pretty much launched an all-out war against labor, starting with the PATCO strike.
Yep. Was that the air traffic controllers?
That's right.
Yeah,
PATCO was the
yeah,
union for the
yeah.
air traffic controllers. And also, while doing that, really slashing the social safety net. And too many Democrats in Congress went along with that.
And yet he's noted as one of our greatest presidents ever.
Well, unknown by whom? I think, well, that's...
Well, you hear it? You hear it for
That's another, that's a whole other...
I understand, I understand.
I wrote a column about that.
I'm sure you did, I'm sure you did. So,
But just to take it to Carter, I mean to Clinton, again, by the time, you know, you got to Clinton, he was turning away from labor being the Democratic Party's primary constituency to high-paid professional workers. So he supported, for example, I mentioned earlier about how setting a basis beyond which people can't fall keeps wages strong. He created now there's no doubt that the welfare program that he inherited was horrible, but what he created was something much worse.
well, what we've got here, Bill,
Yeah.
right, is we've got a revolution, brother. Okay?
All right, I'll leave off the history.
We've got a revolution. No, I'm letting you know something.
Yeah.
Now, this is a revolution. We know it, right? I said this on one of my first shows with Penelope Gentleman about the revolution, and Gil Scott-Heron, who is one of the greatest, I think, songwriters in our history, said the
Yes.
revolution will not be televised.
He did.
We say the revolution is going to be televised, it's going to continue, and it's happening right here. So what we're going to talk, you know,
Well,
younger
let me
people
just-
are
let me-
voting today, man. They're voting in
Yes.
record numbers.
Well, I'm going to skip. I know I was getting into too much detail.
No, it's okay.
But I
it's
was
not
going to
bad.
let me just skip over all that. What I was going to tell you about Clinton, what I was going to tell you about Obama, and let me
Sure.
just say another consequence has been the Supreme Court's taking away a series of measures that labor unions could use to organize.
The right to work.
The right to work.
People don't have to pay dues if they don't want to join the union.
You know this.
I got the whole thing, and we've
But-
talked about that, and it's a brutal. It's just a really horrible.
And
way to
last
treat
week we
unions.
got a new Supreme Court justice who we can anticipate
Mm-hmm.
following in that same vein.
Yeah, my concern is that how much more damage can be done here. You know, our Republican friends who may be watching here today can say to us, "Hey, look, you know, we don't agree with you, but you know what? We need to survive."
That's right.
And we worked very hard to get where we are
That's
today.
right.
And to take that and tear it all down is not what we're looking for.
No.
You know, it's not where we want to be right now. And I
Yeah.
don't think that's what, you know, on a national level,
Yeah.
that's not where everybody wants to
Yeah.
be. You know?
Yeah. Okay, just a couple other facts. 7 million, 6 million Americans lost their jobs as a result of NAFTA. No, I got that wrong. 2.6 million Americans lost their jobs as a result of NAFTA.
Okay.
Now, that's not to pit Americans against Mexicans, because 2 million Mexicans lost their farms because of NAFTA. But we have a president now who's saying, well, he campaigned on how NAFTA was bad for working people, and in fact, we have a NAFTA light now that in fact is no better.
So, Bill, I want to talk about on a local level now, and
Yeah.
Somerville in general. And I'm going to just read a little something to you here
Yeah.
of some of the things that,
Sure.
that I've seen. We were in a recession right around 2009. That the whole Fannie Mae
Yeah.
was a real disaster. Not seen since the Great Depression. Many workers, and in particular municipal workers, really took it on the chin. Already in low-paying jobs,
Yeah.
were made less attractive when very high healthcare costs were passed onto them, leaving workers with no raise for 4 years, zero raise in the lean years, has left them still reeling and has put them behind in similar communities. What I'm basically saying to you is that the workers in Somerville, in my opinion, many of them, are behind other communities. The members I represent have never recovered from that recession, so I can certainly relate to those numbers that were in your article that we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
And that should never happen on a local level. And I would always like to think that someone should set the tone with this booming economy, this local booming economy, the things that are going on in the city right now.
Yeah.
I understand that leadership wants to be very careful with how they spend their money, but we are the workers of the city right
Yeah.
now. So on a local level, do you believe that the mayor and the mayor alderman can do more and focus on resolving the low wages in Somerville?
Yes.
And do you have any?
It's two factors. One is the ability to pay for it, the higher wages, and the other is the political commitment to do it. The ability to pay for it has been constrained by the fact that only 16% of the property values, assessed value in the city, is commercial. Residential pays only 60% of the tax rate the commercial pays, but generates twice the costs. So every time that you build a housing unit, a new housing unit, you're either contributing to the structural deficit if there are children who are going to live in it,
Right.
or you are choosing that we don't want kids in our city, and we already have way below the national average in terms
In
of
the city of
family.
Somerville?
Yes,
And we're building a brand new high school up there too, so
but we don't have kids to fully populate it.
okay.
So what's necessary, and what frankly I've been advocating here for 25 years, is that we really, really, really have to encourage commercial development, because if we do, there's a couple benefits of that for labor. One is that we get a whole lot more tax revenue, which we can use to increase salaries. A second is that we have a whole lot more jobs, which increases the labor market, the value of the labor market here.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you on that one because I'm going to tell you why. Because our hopes were, we had very high hopes on the Somerville Assembly Row.
Yeah. So
And
did I.
we did. We really did. We were hoping that, I guess we can say that we're employed and we're working,
Yeah.
which is fantastic, okay? But our wages really aren't where they need to be. And we hope that would rise,
And the reason why it hasn't is because overwhelmingly it's been residential development, not commercial development.
Okay.
So what we need is a whole lot more commercial development.
So do we have anybody who's responsible for this erosion in labor, do you think? Do you think this is just, it's a problem?
Well, let me give you the other half, because that's really the question you're asking. Remember I said, where do we get the money? The second is, where do we get the
Right.
political will?
Right.
And Somerville's leaders have always felt that it was a political necessity to constrain taxes, even though for most people property taxes are going crazy here.
Yeah.
But
Even with the residential exemption.
I mean, I remember back when Mike, and I supported Mike, but I remember when Capuano privatized the garbage workers.
I was there.
And I said to him, what are you doing? These are your allies. And he said, well, the difference in cost of the city is so great, I don't have a choice. Well, he did have a choice. And I like Mike, but he did have a choice. And right now, we have a board of aldermen in which people in which there were many younger influential aldermen who defined themselves as progressive, but as far as I can see, don't really engage labor, don't really engage the working people. And as you well know, they made a commitment a couple of years ago to hold up the creation of new positions in return for bargaining with the mayor
Yes,
to increase workers' salaries.
right.
Didn't happen.
No, that has not happened. You're correct.
So
far,
you need the revenue and you need the will.
no,
And if you had the will, you could get the revenue. If you had the will, you could pursue commercial development.
So that to me is very important. I appreciate that because I agree with that wholeheartedly. With very little time left, because we run and we have it's a short show, but we hit on some very good things right now. Although the economy seems to be, good for some, can you explain how this has affected today's labor force? Because the cost of living in Somerville is off the charts for many. It's no longer a place where you can work, live, and play. The slow erosion of workers' salaries in the city has left them with no choices but to flee to other communities, Bill.
Yeah. I can't count the number of people who I love who've been priced out of this city.
Yes.
And it's unraveling the fabric of our community. These are the people who coach the sports leagues and were the den mothers and were the deacons in their churches and looked after the neighbors who, the elderly neighbor. And they're being replaced by people who are too busy making money to pay their housing costs to get involved in the community.
You know something? I got to say something to you right now because I got something that came to me, and I was at a one of the aldermen to be, that became alderman, and we asked the question about why people are so excited and they love all of this stuff, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but it's kind of like a distraction sometimes.
It is.
The festivals are wonderful.
Yes.
But we have this facade, and we are there. There are workers there. There are your firefighters, your police, your teachers, your nurses, your DPW workers. We're all there, and we're behind all those wonderful things. And we want to be respected, and we just want to be treated properly. And that's what the show really, we focus on all these things. The national grid, the issues at national grid, the Marriott workers that are fighting right now and struggling. And I don't really want to go off point, but who do you think should be taking responsibility of leaving workers in low-paid positions? I know this is an easy one, I'm throwing you a softball here, that are not competitive with other communities. And what can be done to correct this in short?
Well, I think it's pretty much what I said. It's the will and it's the source. You have to single-mindedly pursue commercial development to generate the taxes and jobs and high-paying jobs that kids in our school in our high school can qualify for. And you have to have the political will to say, these are the people who make our community livable. We praise Somerville as such a wonderful place to live, work, and play. We ought to add, if you can afford it.
Well, we've talked about that too, man. I'll tell you right now, we have absolutely talked about that. This square is getting ripped apart. There's going to be a redevelopment that's going to happen down here. We want apprenticeships down here. We want union jobs down here. It's incredibly important. And unions, safety is what it's all about, okay? It's putting people to work. And that's the fabric of our community. And it goes a long way with me. I want to thank the viewers for watching us. I could have done, me and Bill could have talked for a long time. We actually had a half an hour discussion before we even came on the air. And it was very exciting to talk to Bill. And he writes a column in the Somerville Times. If you haven't read anything that he's done, please do that because he is very eloquent and well thought out and a good friend, and I appreciate it. You know what, Bill? I have an SMEA T-shirt for you. All right.
Oh, excellent.
But I had a little snafu with something that occurred. But Somerville stands together. There's a nice little sticker for you. This is a lovely parting gift. Also, I hope you're going to say yes for the nurses. Yes on one. Yes on one. We had nurses. We had the nurses here, and they were fantastic. I can tell you right now. And they told it like it was. They told the truth. There's also the SMEA logo, a sticker for you there.
Beautiful.
I know you'll have them with you as always proudly. And what I want to say is, as I always do, in unity there's strength, peace.